Hi guys, so it's important not to call Tories scumbags, okay? Very important to remember that. Why do you not call them scumbags? Because they don't like to be called scumbags. Got that? Do not call them scumbags. So this brings us to Tory MP Lee Anderson, who believes the reason food banks exist is, wait for it, due to poor cooking skills. Yes, have a listen to him invite MPs from the opposite bench to a food bank in his area, a food bank that he's proud of.
But I go back to my point made about the Honourable Member St Helens North, who made some great comments about food banks. But my invitation is to everybody on that side of the House. Come to Ashfield and work with me for a day in my food bank and see that the brilliant scheme we've got in place, where when people come now for a food parcel, they have to register for a budgeting course and a cooking course.
So people have to register for a budgeting course and a cooking course. Budgeting course. Oh, by chance I found this. This is Lee Anderson from Ashfield, and from the 1st of June 2020 to the 31st of May 2021, he claimed expenses of £208,491.24. But sorry, let's get back to saving money.
What we do at the food bank, we show them how to cook cheap and nutritious meals on a budget. We can make a meal for about 30 pence a day, and this is cooking from scratch. We're glad to give way.
The honourable member for giving way. Can you answer me a simple question? Should it be necessary to have food banks in 21st century Britain?
No, it should not be necessary, but it is necessary because the government has outsourced its responsibilities to charity. And they've also, by design, driven more and more people into poverty. That's why food banks exist. They shouldn't exist. The government should actually look after the public, but the government have decided to remove the social safety net, drive more and more people into poverty by cuts to universal credit and other forms of welfare. Universal credit being an absolute disaster, has driven so many people to rely on food banks. But as I said, this is by design, it's not by accident. The fact that the parts of the Department for Work and Pensions has been outsourced to private companies with a mentality, a profit-driven mentality, to force more and more people off welfare and into jobs, whether those jobs actually provide them with the means to live, where people have to decide between heating their homes and eating. That's why there's a reliance on food banks. They should not exist. The government should provide people with the means to live. That's what a social safety net is about. But the Tories are not interested in that. That's why charity has to do the job of government.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. He makes a great point, and this is exactly my point. So I invite you personally to come to Ashfield, look at our food bank, how it works, and I think you'll see firsthand that there's not this massive use for food banks in this country. We've got generation after generation who cannot cook properly, they can't cook a meal from scratch, they cannot budget. The challenge is there. Come, I'll offer anybody. You sat there with...
How disconnected from reality do you have to be to claim that the reason people rely on food banks is because they can't cook? They don't know how to cook. It's nothing to do with... Well, first, you notice he said there isn't all this great reliance on food banks anyway. But then he says, well, the reason that people rely on food banks is because they can't cook. No, they can't cook not because of ability, but because in this day and age, because they can't afford to cook it. How many stories have we already covered where people have turned up at food banks and refused food that had to be cooked? Not because they weren't able to cook it, Lee, it's because they didn't have the means to cook it, or they were afraid that if they did cook it, they wouldn't be able to pay the gas bill or the heating bill at the end of the month. How absurd is this guy? Is he trolling these people? Is this trolling? Or does he actually take a position and say, I'm going to be on the wrong side of history. I'm going to be on the wrong side of every argument. And I'm going to troll people on the other side? Or is he just that disconnected that he thinks food banks are a good thing? Food banks should not exist. They exist because the government is not doing its job. It's the government's job to provide a social safety net. People lose their job, there is a social safety net to save them, to protect them from poverty. The Tories are not interested in a social safety net. They're very happy for charities to pick up the slack. What is the point in having a government if it doesn't look after its citizens? Really, what is the point of that? What is the point in paying Lee Anderson a wage, a salary, and massive expenses if people have to fend for themselves, basically, or that charities have to fill the gap left by government? So once again, people, remember, do not call them scumbags. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.